my name is Jen, and today we're going to crochet a telescoping pencil case. It has a nice solid base and a textured body. There's an internal fabric that's going to allow it to move up and down, a colorful top fabric. When you unzip the telescoping pencil case, the top comes down and reveals your arts and crafts supplies inside. Whether you like to journal or draw, this case can come out and sit on your desk and hold all of your essential supplies. We are going to begin today by looking at all of our materials. I will also have them all linked for you and listed in the description below. After we go over all of the materials, we're going to look at just the materials that we'll need for today because this is part one of this project. This project is a little bit more involved, so I'm going to be presenting it to you in a part one and a part two. For this project, we'll be using a total of 3 skeins of yarn, 1 skein of wool ease. This is a medium weight yarn by Lion Brand. We'll also be using Lion Brand's True Boo. This yarn has a very nice slip and will help to perform the telescoping function. To add color to the top of our case, we'll be using Karen's Macchiato Cakes. We will also be using 3 crochet hooks, 3.75, 4, and 5 millimeter. You'll need a few stitch markers, a yarn needle, a pair of scissors, an 8-inch zipper, measuring tape, needle and thread. In the description below, there is a link to this Google document that you can print, and this will give you the template you need to cut out the base of your pencil case. For the base, we're using a stiff felt. It's about 4 millimeters thick. It has a sticky side to it. The inside of the pencil case is lined with a 2 millimeter thick stiff felt. I have some cutting tools here. I'm using a cutting mat and a rotary cutter and a straight edge, but you can also do this with a pencil, a ruler, and some craft scissors. Before we get started today, let's have another look at our yarn. When you're designing your pencil case, I would recommend that you start with the macchiato cakes. Choose your favorite colors and then go over to Wool Ease and pick a base color that really complements your top color. And then when you come in with the True Boo, you might want to pick a matching color or you might want to add a little contrast. Once again, I have all of this for you in the description below. Today, in part one, we'll begin by making the base and the body of our pencil case. Here are the materials that we'll be using for part one. We'll need our Wool Ease yarn, some stitch markers, a 3.75 millimeter crochet hook, a yarn needle, scissors, our template, our base material. I'm also using craft scissors on that base material, and we'll have a pencil and a measuring tape. Let's get started by cutting out our base insert. In the description below, there is a link to a Google document that will allow you to print off this template. Once you have your template, go ahead and cut out the shape following along the outside of the black outline. Now we need our base material. Our base material is this heavy-duty black felt. It's about 4 millimeters thick. It has a sticky back. I have included a link to the product that I'm using, but you could also repurpose some nice sturdy plastic, perhaps from some packaging. I would recommend going with something that is waterproof. If I lay my template this way, I could get 2 bases out of this one sheet of felt. I'm going to line up my template to one edge and then just use a pencil to trace around the shape. Once I have my shape transferred onto the base material, I'm using craft scissors. Don't use your good sewing scissors here or your good fabric scissors. Use your craft scissors to cut out this felt, especially since there is glue on one side. We are kind of starting off with some arts and crafts here. But once you have completed your 4 by 2.5 inch base insert, you can set that aside and we'll be getting back to that in just a few minutes. It is time to break out your Wool Ease yarn and your 3.75mm crochet hook. We're going to start today by crocheting the base of our telescoping pencil case. We are also going to be using one side of the base as the gauge for this project. We begin by chaining 5. I like to work my row 1 into the back bumps, but you can also work into the side of these stitches. So for row 1, we're going to work 2 single crochets in the second chain from the hook. Here's 1, and then back into that same stitch. Here's a second one, and now we're going to work a single crochet into each of the next 2 stitches. 1 and 2, and now there's just 1 stitch left, and we're going to work 2 single crochets into this last stitch. This will give us a total of 6 stitches for row 1, and at the end of row 1, we will chain 1 and turn. For row 2, we're going to work 2 single crochets in the first stitch, and then we're going to work 1 single crochet into each of the next 4 stitches. And finally, we'll work 2 single crochets in the last stitch, chain 1 and turn. Row 2 will have a total of 8 stitches. The right side of your work is facing you on the even numbered rows. Here we go into row 3, work 2 single crochets into the first stitch, and then single crochet into each of the next 6 stitches. Two single crochets in the last stitch, chain 1 and turn. Row 3 has a total of 10 stitches. Row 4 is our last increase row. We're going to work 2 single crochets in that first stitch, and then single crochet in each of the next 8 stitches. Two single crochets in the last stitch, and then chain 1 and turn. Row 4 has a total of 12 stitches. For rows 5 through 16, we're going to work a single crochet in each stitch across, chain 1 and turn at the end of each row. Each of these rows will have a total of 12 stitches. Here's a quick look at the fabric after crocheting row number 6, 4, 5, and 6. I'm going to continue on and come back after I finish row 16. And as you can see, I have time traveled us there. We have a total of 16 rows now, and we're ready to chain 1 and turn and head into row 17. Row 17 begins by single crocheting 2 together. To do so, insert your hook into the first stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, and now insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, then yarn over and pull through all 3 remaining loops on your hook. Now we're going to single crochet into each of the next 8 stitches. And then we'll work a single crochet 2 together over the last 2 stitches. At the end of row 17, chain 1 and turn, and this row will have a total of 10 stitches. Row 18 begins by single crocheting 2 together, and then we're going to single crochet in each of the next 6 stitches. When we come to the last 2 stitches of the row, we're going to single crochet those 2 stitches together, and then we're going to chain 1 and turn. Row 18 has a total of 8 stitches. Row 19, we're beginning with that single crochet 2 together, and then we're going to single crochet in each of the next 4 stitches. And then when we come to those last 2, we're going to single crochet 2 together to finish off this row of 6 stitches. We'll chain 1 and turn. Row 20 is our last row, and it is a short one. We're going to single crochet 2 together, then single crochet in each of the next 2 stitches, and then single crochet 2 together. Row 20 has a total of 4 stitches, and when you reach the end, you can cut your working yarn and then yarn over and pull it through that last loop on your hook. We need to make 2 of these shapes, but first we're going to use this one as the gauge for our project. As you can see, it measures 4.5 inches or about 11.5 centimeters long. When I turn it over here, you can see it's 3 inches or about 7.5 centimeters wide. Please adjust your hook size if necessary to obtain this gauge. You can see that when I set our felt insert on top of the base shape, it's larger than the felt insert by about 1/4 of an inch all the way around. If you recall, the right side of our fabric was facing us on the even numbered rows. You can turn your fabric over and mark the wrong side. I also wanted to take this opportunity to show you how easy it is to use a scrap piece of yarn if you don't happen to own stitch markers. Simply fold your scrap piece of yarn in half, and then you can insert your crochet hook into whatever space or stitch that you want to mark. Latch on to the fold of your scrap yarn with your crochet hook and pull it through the space or the stitch. Yarn over with both ends and then pull those ends through that loop. This creates a slip knot that pulls out easily when you're done with your stitch marker. In truth, these base shapes are pretty reversible, so if you can't figure out the right side from the wrong side, don't worry too much about that. I did want to share how to use scrap yarn as a stitch marker because that is just a handy little trick to have up your sleeve, and let's face it, we always have some yarn on hand. Once you've created a base shape that matches our gauge for this project, go ahead and crochet that second base shape. Do not cut your working yarn when you finish your second base shape because we're going to continue on from this point and assemble the base of our case. We are going to do this by making a little base sandwich. So you can see I have the wrong side facing up on one of the base pieces. And now I'm going to go ahead and remove the sticky back from our base insert. And then I'm just going to use that to stick it onto this base shape, but I'm going to go ahead and tuck in the loose ends first. I'm not pulling them tight, but there's really no need to weave in these loose ends. They will tuck in nicely right under that base. This means we don't have to weave in these loose ends, and it saves us just a little bit of work in the future. So you can see I'm just centering this base as neatly onto the base shape. I'm going to work my way around and make sure I have about 1/4 inch of fabric sticking out from all angles. When I'm happy, I'm giving it a little bit of a press and just making sure that that stays in place. And now I can take the other base shape, sandwich it on so the wrong sides are facing each other, with the insert in the middle, and now we're going to go ahead and crochet these 2 sides together. So with that working yarn, I'm going to chain 1, I'm going to hold my sandwich and turn the whole thing over, and we're going to begin by working across the 4 stitches along the short side of our base. You're going to be working through both layers of fabric as we do this, so both layers of fabric throughout this assembly process, and you're simply going to work 1 single crochet in each of the next 4 stitches. Now it's time to work our way across the long side. We're going to be working 18 single crochets evenly across, working into the end of each row. Only we're going to be skipping the first row and the last row. Remember, these base shapes have a total of 20 rows. So if we're skipping the first and the last, there are 18 rows in the middle. So you've got those 4 stitches along the short side, you skip the end of that first row, work 1 single crochet into the end of each of the next 18 rows, and then we're going to skip the last row. This can definitely feel a little bit awkward. Just take your time, go row by row. The main thing to focus on is that both of your pieces of fabric are lining up and you're working through the same end row on each corresponding piece of base fabric. You can see that we're coming up to the end of this side. It's always a good idea to double check your stitch count. It's nice to do it as you go rather than get to the end of this whole assembly and then realize that you were a stitch off somewhere. Before we do the next short side, I'm going to go ahead and tuck in this other loose end right into the base. And now we can finish off our assembly by working 1 single crochet into each of the next 4 stitches. So we're just working our way across the short side of our oval shape. And then it'll be time to work across the other long row. I'm going to go ahead and time travel to the end. As you can see, before I cut my working yarn, I am double checking my stitch count. Having an accurate stitch count is very important as we head into the body of the telescoping pencil case. So make sure that you have a total of 44 single crochets in this round. And you can also see that I am marking the very first stitch of the round, and I'm just going to use that as a guide as I work my invisible finish off. So I have cut my working yarn, and then you just pull on that last loop and pull that working yarn right through that last stitch, and then thread it onto your yarn needle. You're going to skip the first stitch of the round and insert your needle under both the front and back loops of the next stitch. Then you're going to bring this back to the very last stitch of the round and insert your needle between the front and back loops of that last stitch, sending it towards the back side of your work. There's also a little thread right behind the back loop that I also like to catch with my needle. It just adds some extra security and holds that stitch in place. When you pull the excess yarn, don't pull it until it's 100% tight. Pull it until it forms the appearance of a regular sized stitch on the front of your work. Then you can go ahead and weave in this loose end on the wrong side of your work. Just to be clear, the right side of the base was facing as you were crocheting this round. I did place a stitch marker on the wrong side. This is going to become the inside of the pencil case. I always make 3 passes with my needle when I'm weaving in my loose ends. That is going to make for a very secure hold. And now we can have a look at the base of our case. It's nice and sturdy. It's going to perform its job really well and make sure that our pencil case can stand up tall. And before we actually make the body of our case, I want to do one more thing. I want to take 4 stitch markers. We're going to place 2 stitch markers in the center 2 stitches of both of the short sides of the base shape. There should be a total of 22 stitches across the long sides when you're counting from stitch marker to stitch marker. So just take a moment, make sure those stitch markers are as centered on the short sides as you possibly can get them, and make sure there's a total of 22 stitches across the long side from stitch marker to stitch marker. These stitch markers are going to set us up for success as we go into the body of the telescoping pencil case. There are 22 stitches across each of the long sides, and we're going to be making the body of the case in 2 halves. So we're going to be using these stitch markers as our beginning and ending points for each side of the body of the case. This is a good time for a break. Hit the pause button, stretch those fingers, get some water before we head into the next stage of our project, the body of our telescoping pencil case. I hope you enjoyed a nice break, but of course the tutorial must go on. So here is our base shape. We have a stitch marker marking what's going to be the inside of the case right here. This will be the outside of the case or the right side facing. We're going to continue with our wool ease yarn and the same hook that you have been using. We're going to start with the stitch marker on the right and work our way across the long side of our base shape. For row 1, we're going to join with a single crochet at this stitch marker. To do so, insert your hook into that stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull through 2. That is a joining or a standing single crochet. After that, you are simply going to work 1 single crochet into each of the next 21 stitches, and then you'll chain 1 and turn. Remember that each one of these sides will have a total of 22 stitches. These stitches can feel a little bit tight, especially as we work our way around the curves. I just wanted to note that. In fact, you might be feeling this a bit over the first few rows. We're attached to that very firm base, and it's just not allowing a lot of give in the fabric. As the length of the fabric grows, this eases up and it does get a lot easier. So I just wanted to let you know that if you're struggling a little bit, it will get easier as we get a few rows in. All that being said, try to stick with a nice middle of the road tension. Sometimes when work is harder, our stitches get tighter. And as you can see, while I've been chatting away here, we have made it to the final stitch of this row, and I am double checking my stitch count to make sure that I have a total of 22 stitches before I chain 1 and turn. Here we are on row 2. We're going to start by working a single crochet into the first stitch and then working under the front loop only of the next stitch. We're going to work a single crochet. Now we begin our repeating pattern. You're going to single crochet in the next stitch, and then you're going to front loop only single crochet in the stitch after that, and then go back to the beginning of that repeat. So we're just single crocheting across, but every other stitch is worked under the front loop only. Just take your time with this. Sometimes when you reach your hook under just the front loop, you can accidentally split the plies on the thread. So just watch out for that as you go. And we're going to work our way across until only 2 stitches remain. We're going to single crochet in each of those last 2 stitches and then chain 1 and turn. Here we are on row 3, and you'll note that the right side of our work is facing us when we are on the odd numbered rows. For row 3, we're going to start by working a single crochet in the first stitch, and then we're going to work a single crochet in the next stitch, and then start our repeating pattern. Our next stitch is a half double crochet that is worked into that unworked back loop from the previous row. Yarn over, insert your hook from bottom to top underneath that back loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then yarn over, pull through all 3. Then we're going to skip the next stitch of our current row, the one behind that half double crochet, and single crochet in the next stitch. Then back to that repeating pattern. Yarn over, insert your hook under that unworked back loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 3, skip the next stitch, and then single crochet in the stitch after that. We're going to repeat this pattern all the way across. After your last single crochet, chain 1 and turn. For row 4, we begin by working a single crochet into the first stitch. You might notice that the stitches are curving away from you just a little bit. Keep that in mind as you work across these rows. Single crochet in the next stitch, and then we're going to front loop only, single crochet in the next stitch, single crochet in the stitch after that. And then we go back to the beginning of that repeat. Front loop only, single crochet in the next stitch, single crochet in the stitch after that. We're going to work this repeat all the way across. I have time traveled to the end of row 4. We're working that chain 1 and turn, and now we're ready to begin row 5. I love that you can already see the texture coming into our fabric. For row 5, we're going to single crochet in the first stitch, and then the next stitch is our half double crochet into the unworked back loop from the previous row. We skip a stitch and then we start our repeating pattern by working a single crochet into the next stitch, and then that half double crochet into the next unworked back loop, skip the next stitch of the current row, and then go back to the beginning of the repeat. We'll continue this repeat all the way across until only 2 stitches remain. At the end of the row, you'll work a single crochet into each of those last 2 stitches and then chain 1 and turn. I'm actually placing a stitch marker into my loop so that we can have a look at our work so far. So we've just completed rows 1 through 5 on one side of the body of our pencil case. Before we carry on, it's very important that you measure the width of this side of your pencil case. Use a tape measure and wrap it around that curve, and the width should measure just as close to 6 inches as you can get it to be. The sizing really is important in this project, so if yours is measuring quite a bit longer or shorter, it is worth it to go ahead and take the time to redo these first 5 rows. So many things can affect the tension of our work, from the mood we're in, whether or not we're hungry or well rested. You likely do not need to change your hook size, but if yours is quite a bit shorter, 5 to 5.5 inches, you need to relax your tension just a little bit, or if it's a little bit too long, 6 6.5 inches, then you need to firm up that tension just a touch. We also need to consider that our tension needs to be the same for both sides of the body. Our strategy for achieving this is to actually work both sides simultaneously. So you can see that right now I'm working from the center pull end of my wool ease skein. I'm going to go ahead and take off the paper here and find the other end of this yarn. So I'm going to be using both ends of this one skein of yarn, and with one end I'm going to be working one side, and with the other end I'm going to be working the other side of the body of my case. Of course, if you happen to have an extra skein of wool ease laying around, you could use 2 skeins of yarn, and that would mean that you wouldn't have to worry about those 2 ends getting twisted up as you work these sides. So we've already started our first side, and with the right side of the base facing us, we're going to join the other end of our skein of yarn with a single crochet to this stitch marker. Remember, for row 1, we're going to work 1 single crochet in each stitch across. At the end of row 1, you should have a total of 22 stitches, and I do recommend that you double check your stitch count before you chain 1 and turn. For the pattern directions for rows 1 through 5, you can go back and follow along with the first side, and I've also written them out for you in the description below. Through the magic of editing, I am just finishing up row 5, and I want to measure this side as well and make sure it's measuring in right about at 6 inches. So far, it looks like I'm right about where I need to be. If we look at our base and the beginning of our sides, there is a bit of a gap on either end, but this should not be a cause for concern. When we crochet these side seams and pull the sides together, that's really going to add to the structure of the body of our case. Now it's time to continue working on the sides of our case. For rows 6 through 23, we're going to be repeating rows 2 through 5 in that order. To maintain an even tension, I recommend that you do 4 rows on one side. So beginning with one side, you'll work 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then you'll flip to the other side of your work. And on this side, you'll work rows 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then you go back to the other side. So if you keep going back and forth as you work, not only will your tension stay nice and even, but you'll also be finishing up both sides of the body at the same time. Here are the written directions for rows 2 through 5. You can take a screenshot or pause the video right here and refer to these pattern directions as you work through the body of your telescoping pencil case. I am popping back in. I have the body of my case about 2/3 of the way complete, and I just wanted to take a look at how we're coming along so far. I'm also going to take this opportunity to double check the width measurements of both sides. This first side is right at 6 inches. The second side might be just a teeny bit shy of 6 inches, but it's very close. So I know it's all going to work out just fine. There is a little bit of stretch to this fabric, although this fabric was designed not just to have some texture to it, but to have a little bit more structure and density. Now that we have a little more length in the fabric, it's much easier to see how the side seams are going to come together. I also wanted to take just a second and look at how to count these rows. I named this stitch the carrot stitch, and that is for the shape that's created when we're working those half double crochets through the back loops. They look like little triangle tops. The first row where these carrots present is on row number 3, so you can simply count the rows of carrots, 3, 5, 7, 9, and so on. I just finished row 17, so I'm going to come back when I have both of my sides completed up to row 23. Here I am back again with both of my sides worked through row 23. For row 24, we're going to join our hook back to that last loop, chain 1 and turn, and then just work single crochets in each stitch across. At the end of row 24, do not finish off your work, but repeat row 24 for the other side of the body of your case. You can see that I use stitch markers just to hold that loop in place. That way, if your working yarn gets pulled on, your work does not get pulled out. With both of our sides completed, and before we move on to creating our side seams, I'd like you to take a stitch marker and mark the first and last stitch of both of your row 24s. So the last row on both of these sides, please place a stitch marker in the first and last stitches. Now it's time to turn the body of the case inside out. Remember, the inside is marked by that stitch marker on the inside of the base. So go ahead and turn your work inside out, and then we're going to use our working yarn to single crochet down the sides of our case and joining these sides together. You're just going to want to line up the rows so that each row is lining up from either side. You can see that these end rows almost form what looks like hills and valleys. Hill, valley, hill, valley. Now we're just going to take out that stitch marker that was holding on to our last loop and rejoin our crochet hook, chain 1, and we're going to place our very first stitch at the base of this last stitch, and then through the base of the first stitch on the other side. So just go right into the bases of these stitches. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, just a regular single crochet. And now we're going to continue working down the side. There's going to be a total of 23 single crochets. We just did 1, so we need to work 22 more. And we're just going through both layers of fabric through the end of each row. There is definitely a little more tension in the fabric as you get close to the base. So over the last 2 or 3 stitches, just take your time and really work hard to make sure you're matching up those end rows so that you're working through the same row on each side of fabric. That way the top of the fabric on the case will rest nice and even. Once you've completed that last stitch, you can go ahead and cut your working yarn and pull it through the final loop. If we turn our work right side out, you can see I'm kind of running my finger along the seam to smooth it out, but everything's looking nice on the right side of the fabric. Turn your work back inside out and repeat this process for the other side. When both of your side seams are complete, you can go ahead and weave in these 4 loose ends. I love that we've worked this project all the way to this point, and so far we've only had 4 loose ends to weave in, even with all of the construction that we've done. Once those loose ends are woven in, the body of your telescoping pencil case is complete. We can go ahead and remove that stitch marker that's marking the inside of the pencil case and then turn our case right side out. I do like to play with the fabric a little bit and sculpt it into shape, but truly the nice thing about our bag at this point is that it already has a really nice amount of structure, and that's before we add the felt insert that's going to give it even more structural integrity. You can see that the height of our bag is measuring in at right about 5.5 inches, and that's going down to the bottom of the base. On the inside, it'll be a little bit closer to 5 inches, and that is all the height we want for this taller telescoping pencil case that is able to hold some of your longer pens, brushes, and accessories. What inspired me to create a crocheted version of a telescoping pencil case is that I really wanted one that was a little bit bigger and a little bit taller. I was finding that I was struggling to fit all of my supplies in the ones that I was finding in my local hobby stores or online. It's also just really satisfying to be able to make something for yourself, and I especially love doing this with crochet. I can't tell you how often I see things out in the world, and my first thought is, how can I crochet that? This is the end of part 1 of the telescoping pencil case, but I will be back next week and we will complete our project. Next week, we'll be cutting the felt insert that will go inside of our case. We'll also be crocheting the true boo into our telescoping portion and then finishing it off with our top fabric and sewing in a zipper. As you can see, there is still quite a bit for us to do, but I will be back next week and we will finish this project together. Please hit like and subscribe to ensure that you don't miss part 2. For now, if you're crocheting along with me, I hope you're enjoying the project. Thank you so much for watching and joining me today, and I'll see you next time.